So where'd you get the idea to attempt 31 marathons in 31 days?
So after my bike ride, I tried to make the Paralympics for a triathlon, and I did not succeed. I failed in that attempt. But with every failure, there is a lesson learned, and I learned when I was training for a triathlon that I was pretty good at running. I was able to run the 5K triathlon, 5K distance at the end of the triathlon in 18 minutes flat, which is pretty fast. That's maxing out the Marine Corps PFT. You can't get any faster than that. And so it's pretty fast. So I realized, I have a decent talent for running. And I had run the Marine Corps Marathon the year before, and so I knew that I could run a marathon. And I was just kind of, after this failed attempt to make the Paralympics, just kind of thinking about what my next mission could be, and I wanted to do another thing like my bike ride. And I had heard about other people doing this kind of thing where they do, 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states, or 50 Ironmans in 50 days in 50 states. So, I decided I wanted to do marathons, and I kind of put my own little spin on it. And I said, well, you know what? I want to get this story in front of as many eyeballs as I can. So to do 31 marathons straight in my backyard isn't really going to do that. So I need to do. I could go down to the trail every day for 31 straight and do it, and nobody would ever care, and nobody would ever find out about it. And it'd be the same amount of. It'd be just as impressive to do. And so I want to get this in front of as many eyeballs as possible. So I need to do it in major cities where there's a lot of people that can find out about it and spread it that way. And so I figured, all right, I'll take that same formula and do 31 marathons all in different cities. And I picked 31 because I was trying to figure of a good number. So I started with the 20 number, which is the number associated with number of veteran suicides every day. I figured that'd be a pretty powerful number. But after thinking about that, I kind of figured it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough marathons in a row. And I figured by the time...
More marathons in a row.
By the time I got started with that, by the time I got kind of some momentum going, it'd pretty much be over. And so I didn't figure to have it as big an impact. So I wanted to do more. So I was like, well, what about 50? And so I was like, well, okay, 50, I could probably do it if I trained enough for it. But 50 might be too many. It might be too long. So by the time I started getting going, and then I'm at 40, I still have 10 more, people are going to kind of maybe lose interest and be like, oh, is that guy still doing that? Because I found out about the Iron Cowboy doing his 50 Ironmans in 50 days, and I kind of had that same thing where I was like, oh, this is going to be awesome. I was following him for the first couple weeks, and then eventually I'm like, oh, is he even finished it? Oh, wow. And I kind of lost interest. So I'm like, all right, well, what if I just did it for a month? I think people can probably pay attention for a month and will really be interested for a month before they really move on. It's like, all right, month. Okay, month of marathons, and the longest month is 31. So I picked 31. And I have to say, when you know what you're doing is hard when you come on Jocko Podcast and he says, this is insane. And Jocko Willink says something is insane, it's the right level of intensity.
So what kind of miles did you put in to get ready for it? And how long did you train for it?
I trained about 18 months for this specifically. And I say that knowing that I had been an athlete training just about twice a day every day for 5 years at the time. So I had that huge history of being an athlete to begin with. And then on top of that, I put the 18 months of training specifically for this. And so the way it would work would be I would do a 6 week block where I was applying a certain stress. And so my first 6 week block would be, I was just working on getting long distance, because when I was running triathlons, I only ever did 5K max. So I would run an hour. I'd probably run 3 times a week. It would be an hour, 90 minutes, and another hour, and they'd be spaced out by a couple days. So I'd do 6 weeks of that, and then I would do a little test block. And my first test block was running the Marine Corps Marathon again. So just one marathon. And then I'd do another 6 week chunk where I would change the stress and make it a little bit harder. So I would either run a little bit longer, on my really long run for the week, or I would block them together, maybe like run an hour and a half Wednesday and then run an hour Thursday. Kind of change up the blocking. And after that 6 weeks, I would do again, and I would do 2 marathons. And the first time I attempted 2 marathons, I actually failed. I couldn't. I ran the first one the next day. I ran maybe half a marathon, and I quit. I was like, I can't.
Had you already said you were going to run 31 marathons when that happened?
At this point, yeah.
Oh, that's reassuring.
Yeah. So I was like, all right. But I kind of knew.
31 or 2.
Or 2. Yeah, like 2. Well, I told my friends, I was like, yeah, I tried to run 2, and I didn't. They were like, but
What was the failure based on?
I didn't eat enough the day before. So part of the reason I was doing these test blocks was figuring out, first of all, pacing. Different ways to pace it to make sure I didn't blow up, and then figuring out how much I needed to eat, and figuring out what it was going to feel like. And so that first time I attempted 2, I didn't eat enough carbs the day. After that first marathon. So I was just totally depleted the next day. So I was like, okay, it wasn't a lack of willpower or a lack of kind of ability at that time. It was just my approach at that time wasn't right. So I was like, okay, I didn't really panic about that because I kind of knew what happened. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, all right. And so I go, and then I do 6, and I kind of just repeated that for the year and a half, where 6-week chunk, and I just change it, block them together a little bit more, run longer. And then I tried 3 marathons, and I succeeded, and it was pretty easy. Not easy, but I was like, all right, I did
feasible.
3.
It became feasible.
Like, all right, 3. Yeah, I don't feel that bad, And then I did another 6 week, changing the stress again, longer and blocked together more. I ran 5. I was like, all right, 5, okay. And I would mess around with the different pacing strategies, different ways of breaking up each marathon, taking breaks and that kind of thing, and eating different foods just to see how that I would react to that. And then after 5, I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna do any more than 5, because if I do more than 5, I'm just gonna want to keep going. Mm-hmm. I don't really want to. So 5 was enough. I felt really good after 5. And then after that, I just kind of trained through for maybe 3 more months. But every 6 weeks, I kept adding more mileage until I think the last 12 weeks, I was running a marathon every Thursday. And
how many total miles were you putting in a week?
In that last 12 weeks, probably 60. Like my how they say a deadlift starts at 135 pounds, Like my runs would start at 2 hours. I wouldn't do anything less than 2 hours. And then, I would do that marathon on Thursday, and I would run 2 hours the day before and 2 hours the day after. And the reason I was doing that was just run a marathon so many times leading up to it that the thought of running one marathon it's just it became normal to me. And so I was trying to get that
How long would it
mental.
take you of running to run a marathon at the pace, at your sustained 31-day pace?
At my sustained, it was interesting. So
were you running like 8-minute miles, 9-minute miles?
Usually it would be between 8:30 and 9-minute miles. And it was interesting because in the summertime, I was running like a 4.5-hour marathon of total running time. And so all the predictions I put on my website were like, oh, I'm probably going to finish in about this amount of time. But that was during the hot and humid summer in Virginia. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I was doing this, it was in the fall time, so I was actually able to run faster. And people would come out and say, what the heck? You said you're going to be running like 10-minute miles, then you're running 8:30s or 9 minutes. And what else was interesting was I figured my first marathon I'd be fresh, and that would be my fastest marathon. And so that was in London. It was about 4 hours, roughly, of running time with breaks. I would take 3 20-minute breaks. 4 hours of running time. And then it kind of did follow that trajectory where Philadelphia, New York, and Boston were a little bit slower, like 4:05, 4:15, somewhere in there. And then after I got there, I actually started getting faster. So the next, all the way into Chicago, my fastest one was my 10th one in Chicago was 3:50 and of running time. And then after that, it kind of just leveled off, and I'd usually be going somewhere between 350 and 4 hours.
The human body's amazing.
Yeah, and all this
Amazing.
stuff that I've been able to adapt to, and even I still wasn't able to predict that I would actually get faster. I didn't expect that. And so, I mean, this goes to show you that the body can adapt to even more than you think.